I didn't know this, but she testified that even while she was dating Kid Cudi, she was doing freak-offs with Diddy. Well, it is to be expected that the defense scored points today. So in that sense, they won the day because they did cross-examination all day and they were trying to make a number of points. I want to get into something at the end of this. I want to talk about the jury's reaction to all of it because I find it absolutely fascinating how the jury reacted to some of the most graphic testimony and photographs. But let's start with what the defense was trying to do. What they're trying to do is show that everything done was consensual and it was done without coercion or force. For at least one of the charges, that's the ball game. That's why Cassie is primarily there. It's about, did she consent to these freak-offs? Did he force her or coerce her into doing it? So we told you yesterday that the prosecution didn't fully close the loop, that there was a lot of her saying, I didn't want to do it, but she almost never communicated even obliquely that to Diddy. And the communication to Diddy is going to be really important when it comes to the jury instructions. By the way, this is not taking Diddy's side because and the things she testified to are horrendous. I'm talking about the law right now, that ultimately the jury is going to get a set of jury instructions, and that's what they're going to have to deal with. So let's go through it. So the defense questioned Cassie about the freak-offs and whether she was consenting to them, because she testified that she did early on, but then she didn't like it. And then the question is, did she consent? So they presented her with a text in 2009, about a year after they got together, and the text essentially said she loved freak-offs. So that's a year in. They had an 11-year relationship. So I did not think that the defense would have anything closer to now to show this, but they presented a text from March 2017. That is well into the relationship, where the defense said, they read her this text. Cassie said, I love our freak-offs when we both want it. And which is interesting because when we both want it does open the door to, well, what if she didn't want it? And Cassie testified she wouldn't say that loving freak-offs, they were just words at that point. So I'm not sure what that means, but they had this text in 2017. So that's a point they wanted to make, that she was sending text to that effect long into the relationship. They also presented love letters that were clearly love letters coming from both Diddy and Cassie. They were texts and talking about how much they loved each other, how much they wanted to be with each other. And she talked about jealousy. She said that she was jealous of Kim Porter and other people in Diddy's life, people who he had relationships with, that she wanted to be the main person. I got to say, I find this just one of the most interesting parts. She talks about dating Kid Cudi, that there was a point where she was dating Kid Cudi. I didn't know this, but she testified that even while she was dating Kid Cudi, she was doing freak-offs with Diddy. And the defense asked her, why were you doing these freak-offs? And her answer was, it was my job. Now, I'm not sure what that means, and I don't know if the defense is going to close the loop on that. They didn't yet. What does "it's my job" mean? Does it mean that, you know, she is on his label and this is part of what she has to do? Does it mean it's just the way things have rolled along for so many years? I'm not sure what "it's his job" means. "It's my job" means, you know, there are some people, I think this is a big leap, saying that when you say "it's my job," it means she's getting paid for it. And I haven't seen any evidence of that. So I think you'll see that online and it goes down a rabbit hole. I don't think that's the case, because if it were, they'd have receipts and the defense would have brought it up. So I'm not exactly sure what "it's my job" means. Another thing, by the way, that has been circulating online was that the baby oil contained drugs to drug Cassie and the other women who were involved. Cassie testified there were no drugs in the baby oil. By the way, they got this because one of the civil lawsuits, and maybe several of them, actually alleged that there were drugs in the baby oil to secretly and without consent drugging them. But Cassie said there were no drugs in the baby oil. Another thing that I just found really, really interesting was there was one point where Diddy contacted Cassie by text and said, let's do a freak off. And her answer was, I'm ovulating. That's really interesting because I think, so you don't have to say the word no to make it clear. And I think she made it clear that she meant no, certainly as to intercourse. When she says, I'm ovulating, what else can that mean? I mean, she doesn't want to get pregnant from the sex worker. I think that's no jump at all. She did not want to have sex. So then Diddy texts, well, what if we just kiss? So he turns it, and she says yes. And then they do a freak off. And the freak off lasts for more than 10 hours. And I thought that they would ask what happened during those 10 hours. And they didn't. They never got specific. Because if there was intercourse, then a jury could say, wait a minute, he lures her in saying it's going to be kissing, and then they're having intercourse, or she's having intercourse with a sex worker. That never came up. They never, again, closed that loop. I keep using those words, but they didn't close the loop. But I just found it fascinating because I do think when you say, I'm ovulating, that is a no as to sexual intercourse. But that was just kind of left hanging. The other thing that the defense did here was they really wanted to show that Cassie was part of the swingers lifestyle. So they got into this. And again, this is really dicey because what they're doing is, they're looking at this pregnant woman and the jury is looking at this. And if the defense looks like they are badgering or embarrassing her, it's going to backfire. So, but they asked her about it. They said, were you part of this swingers lifestyle? And she mentioned that she had gone to sex clubs with Diddy 2 or 3 times, and that, this was part of the whole swingers thing. They went in San Bernardino at least once, and she watched him having sex with another woman. So she wasn't walking away from it. I mean, I got to say, and I'm not there. I mean, I am not there. And so much of the testimony that somebody gives is kind of wrapped in how they say it. And, gestures and eye contact and whatnot. I haven't seen that, but I got to say that when you just read transcripts, she comes off as very honest, that she's not sugarcoating things. She is not overstating things. She comes off as very honest. And when she talks about how she felt, she doesn't necessarily ascribe it to Diddy that, I didn't want to do it. She doesn't say Diddy still said you have to. I mean, she never took those jumps. And to me, that shows an honest witness. So I got to say, when I've read this over the last couple of days, I think she comes off as incredibly believable. That said, the defense was trying to paint a picture of a relationship that was loving at times, and that where she consented to a lot of these freak-offs, even liked and loved them over a period of time by showing these texts. And the other thing that I thought was really fascinating was, we told you that the prosecution admitted into evidence, or the judge did, the unedited 2016 Intercontinental Hotel tape where Diddy beat her up so badly. And, that's something that the defense is going to have to figure out how to overcome. They tried it today. I don't think this works. They were suggesting to Cassie that as that event was going down, for the day before and that day, he was struggling with drug withdrawal. And I don't know how else to cut this. It seems like what they were doing is they were saying that it was some kind of an excuse that he was going through drug withdrawal and that he wasn't in his right mind. I don't know that that's going to sit well with the jury. She actually said, she didn't know anything about drug withdrawal. She said he was sick at the time. But again, even trying to make a defense out of what people see on that video, I think is just a huge mistake. Frankly, I'm surprised that the defense raised that. I don't see them gaining any points. I actually see them losing points by it. And I also want to say that I think that if there is benefit of the doubt, where a jury kind of thinks Cassie's right, but they're not positive Cassie's right, I think they are going to give her the benefit of the doubt because, at least in my mind, she appears so honest in what she's saying. I want to go over something else, which I think is really interesting, that when the jury was picked, during voir dire, the jury selection process, they were asked about, whether they were squeamish hearing about these lurid details, which they did hear about. And, the jurors that were picked said they could handle it. You never know until you know, right? You never know until you see it. Well, late yesterday, the jury was shown screen grabs of some of the Freakoffs, and they were really vivid. That jury was stoic. That jury didn't flinch. Their jaws didn't drop. I mean, this jury all along has been really, really stoic. And I got to say, it really surprises me because I've seen juries that are just animated when they're hearing testimony and they show disgust and all. This jury was just calm, even, and it seemed like nothing was shocking them. Although today, our producer who's in the courtroom this afternoon said that they seemed a little bored by the defense, that the defense seemed to be rambling on. So I think that's something that is kind of interesting. One of the things I want to talk about is racketeering, which we haven't talked about yet. One of the charges is that Diddy ran a criminal organization. He's the only one charged. Usually, this is reserved for, organized crime, like the mafia. And here they're saying this individual was running an organized crime ring. Well, the Freakoffs are not really an organized crime. I suppose they could say he had his assistant book the hotel room and everything else. I don't know the jury's going to look at that as organized crime. But they did get into Kid Cudi because she was dating Kid Cudi at one point. And, there are all sorts of stories that Kid Cudi's car blew up, and it was Diddy that had one of his goons go out and blow it up. And they got into this, and they talked about it. She never delivered the knockout blow and said, and Diddy told me that he did it. But they reference blowing up Kid Cudi's car, but she never says he did it. I have a feeling that there are going to be other witnesses who come along and may try and wrap that in a bow for the prosecution. We haven't seen it yet, but this was the first really direct case of racketeering, at least that I've seen in the transcript. So it seems like they're setting that up. So just talking broadly here, everybody talked about Cassie as the witness, where it will be signed, sealed, and delivered a guilty verdict for Diddy. I don't think she is that. I think she has given them an enormous amount of material, but there are going to be other witnesses. And remember, the prosecution is going to go 6 weeks. So we have only just begun this case. And I think there are going to be other witnesses that are going to try to tie things up for the prosecution. I don't think that, maybe some of it was tied up here. There was a point where she said she didn't want to do a freak-off, but she kind of told him gently because she didn't want to anger him. And they never really got into what the word gently means and what she specifically said. But, that could be really damning for Diddy, because that was one instance where at least she said no. But all of the other things, that when she says she was raped by Diddy, when she was dating her now husband, Alex Fine, before they got married, and he went into her house and raped her, that is clearly, if true, a state crime. But it's not connected to this charge. So the short story here is, I don't think Cassie is the be-all and end-all when she walks down from the stand. But, her testimony was impactful. It certainly sets the scene of what Diddy is like. And that does kind of lead to the last thing, which is she so dirtied him up that, some juries just look at that and say, I really can't look at much more. I've already made my decision. And, the Cassie video alone, where she's beaten brutally in that hotel lobby, in that hotel hallway, that may do it for a lot of jurors just right there, even though it doesn't necessarily prove the case. Because remember, the defense is saying that the beating had nothing to do with the freak-off. It had to do with the cell phone that Cassie had seen, and that she was holding Diddy's cell phone when he attacked her. That's not an excuse. That's domestic violence. He is a lucky man he didn't get prosecuted for it. I just don't know that this was the be-all and end-all in the strict legal sense. Whether a jury listens to it and says, he is just a monster and we're going to put him away, that is possible. So bottom line here is, this jury, and this is what I wanted to get into when we started at the beginning. I've been in court many times where I've seen juries, and I could read them like a book, and you could just tell whose side they were on. This jury is so stoic, emotionless when it comes to almost all of this testimony, and it's not going to get more graphic than it's gotten, that if you start reading that somebody looked at the tea leaves and said the jury is leaning toward the defense or the jury is leaning toward the prosecutors, I don't think you can say that. I don't think the jury, frankly, has made up their mind on anything yet. I don't think, because they know this trial has a long way to go. But don't believe it. I've seen plenty of juries that are completely misread. So to be continued.